Draco Malfoy and the Truth of the Heart. Bart Draco will hear about this. Chapter 11. Recoveries and Reconciliations. Draco floated to consciousness very slowly, as if he was underwater and laden with weights that kept him down. He could hear muffled voices somewhere in his vicinity, but he couldn't focus on them, which made it impossible both to identify the speaker or make out what they were saying. It was only when he was able to pinpoint one of the voices as Harry's that he became more aware. He blinked his eyes open. It took a while for his sight to sharpen. Everything seemed too bright and too soft all at once, and finally it registered with him that he was settled on one of the beds inside their tent. Harry was nowhere inside his direct line of vision, but he could still hear him talking in a low voice, so he tiredly turned his head to follow the sound. He found Harry sitting at the kitchen table with Weasley. Their hands clapped around mugs of tea as they held a muttered conversation. It appeared that Draco had made some sort of noise as he'd moved, because Harry tensed the moment he got a proper look at him, turning to flick a glance into the direction of Draco's bed. Then his eyes widened and he was on his feet in an instant, his cup of tea spilling over as he carelessly discarded it onto the table. "Draco!" he said urgently, crossing the room to get to him and sitting on the edge of his bed, making the mattress dip. "You're awake! Oh my God, are you all right? Say something, please!" His hands were touching Draco's face, stroking his hair from his eyes and caressing his skin, and Draco needed a moment to find words, and even longer to make his throat cooperate enough to push them out. "Thirsty!" he croaked. Of course, Harry nodded, moving to get up, probably to get the water, but then someone was already handing it to him. Hermione, Draco realized. Weasley must have called her. Something was nagging at the back of Draco's mind, but he was too fuzzy to pay any attention to it. Harry moved closer to him and perched him up a little, helping him drink. It took more of Draco's energy than it should. "Better?" Harry asked when he pulled the glasses away. Draco nodded. "He needs to eat, Harry," Hermione said urgently. "He hasn't had any nutrition in days." "Right," Harry agreed, eyes not leaving Draco's face. "I've got cereal balls," Weasley offered. "They're rich on nutrients, right?" Hermione didn't answer, her jaw set tight, but she held out her hand, palm up. Weasley dove for his backpack. "What happened?" Draco muttered, meeting Harry's attentive expression once more. Harry's fingers stilled for a second in their caresses before they continued gently stroking over his cheekbone. "We went to Godric's Hollow," he said simply. "You were hurt." Draco frowned, trying to remember. There were blurry images of a graveyard and finding Lily and James's grave, and then the ruin of their house, and Bathilda Bagshot approaching them. "She was the snake!" He breathed, his empty stomach lurching at the memory of the creature rising from Bathilda's body. "Yeah." Harry nodded, green eyes blazing with pain as he regarded him. "I'm so sorry, Draco. It was a trap." "It's not your fault," Draco sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. "I wanted to go too, remember?" "Yes, but Hermione knew something wasn't right about her," Harry insisted. "I should have listened. I never learn, and you almost—" Harry didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to, his meaning clear. Draco wondered how close he'd actually come to giving his life for Harry this time around. Distantly, he thought he should feel more afraid at the thought. Harry clearly was. He opened his eyes again, regarding Harry's haunted expression. "How long was I out?" he asked. 3 days, Hermione answered, making Draco glance back at her. She too looked exhausted and worried. "We tried to counteract the venom as soon as we'd gotten out of there, but the fangs had pierced your arteries and the venom had spread quickly. You'd also lost so much blood. It was a really close call, Draco." Draco blinked and nodded. He felt a little disconnected from the information. After a moment of silence, Harry nudged him a little, silently asking him to make room in the small bed. He then manhandled him enough so that Draco was sitting propped with his back against Harry's chest, arms safely wrapped around his waist to keep him upright. It was a comfortable, cozy position, and when Harry gestured for Hermione to hand him the cereal bar, Draco accepted it without a fuss. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he knew that Hermione was bright. He felt way too faint and needed nutrition as soon as possible. As Draco nibbled on his snack, Weasley suggested, "Hermione and I could drop by Muggletown for food this afternoon, so Malfoy can have something proper for dinner." When Hermione turned to glare at him, he flushed a deep scarlet and held up his hands defensively, quickly adding, You said he needed food, and I'm sure Harry wants to stand by his side, so I just thought...
Ah, fine, she groaned. But that doesn't mean you're forgiven.
And with that, she turned on her heels and stormed out of the tent. It was then that Draco realized that Weasley was not supposed to be here. His eyes narrowed. When did you get back? He demanded, lowering his half-eaten cereal bar. If possible, Weasley flushed even brighter and looked at Harry for help. Yesterday while you were out, Harry explained in a soft voice. He saved my life, Draco. How come your life needed saving again? Draco asked sharply. I thought I almost died 3 days ago to do just that. Harry flinched, but explained in a calm voice. I found Gryffindor's sword, but it was on the bottom of a pond, and the Horcrux almost drowned me when I got to it. Ron dragged me out of the water. He also took care of the Horcrux. Draco glowered at his cereal bar because really, what could he say to that? Of course Harry accepted him back with open arms after all of that. It was Harry! Holy shit, Malfoy, Weasley said, biting his lip. What I said the day I left. You can stuff it! Draco cut him off, glaring at him. I don't want to hear it! Weasley looked back at him, hopelessly pleading, but Draco was not swayed. Harry might forgive you just like that, because he always does, but I won't, he clarified. So save it! Ron, Harry said very softly. Leave it for now. This is not the moment. Weasley gulped and nodded. Then he got to his feet and left the tent as well. Hermione would be pleased, Draco thought grimly. Harry tightened his arms around him, leaning his cheek against Draco's. Eat, he whispered. Draco did, forcing the last of the cereal bar down his throat. When he had eaten up, Harry took the wrapping from it and dumped it onto the bedside table. He then shifted them back into a horizontal position, lying down with Draco and draping the covers over him. He had his arms still firmly wrapped around Draco, clearly unwilling to give an inch, and Draco let himself rest against Harry's chest, closing his eyes again. How can I still be so tired after sleeping for 3 days? He lamented. Harry gulped and then leaned in to kiss the top of Draco's head. You don't know how close it was, Harry whispered, his voice a little unsteady. For a while, I really thought... He drew in a shaky breath and his hold on Draco tightened to the point where it was almost painful. What did I tell you about charging in recklessly to save me? Harry demanded, though the tone of his voice was still gentle, in stark contrast to his reprimand. You could have used your wand and put up a shield jump. I didn't think, Draco muttered. My mind blanked. It always does, Harry sighed. You're so smart, and then you keep doing these stupid things, and then you wonder why I didn't want to take you along. You're not going to start being all weird and cold again now, right? Draco checked. His speech was slurring a little. He was so bloody tired. No, Harry promised, pressing his nose into Draco's hair and inhaling. I'm not. It's just... Please be more careful, Draco. Please. I beg you. I almost lost you, and I'm not sure I'd survive that. So take care of yourself. Not only for me, but of yourself too. Okay? Draco nodded. It was all that he was capable of. He was quickly drifting into unconsciousness, and even though he was trying to hold on, fully aware that this conversation was important, he couldn't keep his eyes open, couldn't keep his mind focused. He thought Harry was saying something more, but he was already falling asleep. When he woke the next time, Harry was still wrapped around him. It was dark in the tent, apart from a single candle lit on the kitchen table, and Draco thought he saw Hermione sleeping in the bed across from theirs. That meant Weasley was probably outside, keeping watch. He shifted slightly, stretching gingerly, and it roused Harry, who jerked and tightened his arms around him, raising his head to blink down at him with unnatural alertness, belying his lingering concern. Draco, he whispered, are you awake? Yes, he murmured. Sorry, I wasn't out for another 3 days, right? Only the rest of the day, Harry assured him, moving to sit up and taking Draco with him. He went grudgingly. You should eat. Hermione and Ron made soup earlier, and they left it under a stasis charm. Quietly they made it towards the kitchens, where a pot of soup was indeed waiting on the stove. Harry helped Draco into a chair before he turned to pour Draco a bowl. Draco absent-mindedly rubbed at his neck, frowning when he felt a new scar tissue across his skin. Harry halted in his movements as he watched Draco before setting the dish down in front of Draco, urging him to eat. The soup was rich with vegetables and chicken, and Harry must have given them some instructions with the seasoning because it actually didn't taste bad. He ate it silently, trying not to meet Harry's eyes as the other watched him eat. When he was done, he took the plate from Draco and cleaned up. "You're not eating?" Draco asked quietly. "Not very hungry." Harry shrugged. Draco waited until Harry sat back down. Harry's eyes flickered back to Draco's throat, where he now knew the fresh scar would be visible. "Hey!" Draco whispered, reaching out to touch Harry's cheek and catching his eyes. "I'm still here, right? No harm done?"
"It was like my worst nightmare come true, Draco,"
he whispered, staring back at him with wide eyes.
"There was blood everywhere, and you weren't responding, and..."
He gulped, shaking his head. His eyes were focused on a drop of wax sliding down the candlestick as he continued.
"If you had died that night, it would have been my fault. Just like Sirius was my fault. And that's exactly the thing I've been most afraid of. To lose you because of my own recklessness."
"I thought it was my recklessness that got me into that situation," Draco reminded him, but Harry didn't rise to the bait. He sighed and ran his thumb along Harry's jaw, feeling the slight roughness of his stubble. "Harry, you can't blame yourself for everything that goes wrong. If you hold yourself responsible for everything, you will collapse underneath the pressure."
"But we both know I have the responsibility for every decision we make."
Harry contradicted him, an edge to his voice. "No, you don't," Draco argued. "We are all adults, and we can make our own choices. We chose to be here, and we choose to agree or disagree with you. We are a team, Harry. It's a shared responsibility. Our mistakes are our own." Harry stared at him, shaking his head.
"How come?" he muttered, sounding bewildered. "You seem to always know exactly what to say, to put my mind a little more at ease, or to at least make sense of what's going on with me, and at the same time, I never appear to have a clue what's going on in your head."
Draco blinked, staring at him, confused. "I'm not sure what you mean," he frowned. Harry sighed, shaking his head. He leaned in to kiss his forehead, lingering.
"Never mind,"
he whispered.
I never want to lose you."
"You won't," Draco told him, trying to reassure the other boy. Harry didn't respond, simply holding on to him. Draco recovered slowly over the course of the next week, with constant nourishment and sleep. Throughout his healing process, Harry treated him like he was something breakable, but Draco couldn't really begrudge him the protectiveness. He knew very well that he had scared his boyfriend to the bones with his stunt, and the least he could do was indulge his need to fuss over him until he was back to full strength. Hermione and Draco both kept a stubborn grudge against Weasley, no matter how hard he tried to play nice with them. Harry advocated for him the best he could, but it became quickly clear that no matter what he said or did, Hermione and Draco continued to give their ginger addition the cold shoulder. "I'm telling you, I tried to pretend the moment I disapparated," Weasley told Hermione desperately one afternoon. "But I ran right into a bunch of snatches, and I only escaped because I was able to convince them that I was actually Stein Schomburg, and—"
"No, I don't want to hear it!" she snapped, digging an angry finger into his chest. "You shouldn't have left in the first place! I don't care about any stories you have trying to justify the length of your absence! You left! Nothing can make up for that!"
And with that, she stormed out of the tent, and Draco was fiercely proud of her for not letting him lull her in. Weasley approached him, too, once he was fully recovered. It baffled Draco when he entered the tent, asking Harry for a word with Draco with an air of determination. Harry smiled at Weasley and left them without a comment, which clued Draco in that they had discussed this move beforehand. He tried not to feel played, glowering as Weasley took a seat across from him at the kitchen table.
"Malfoy,"
he said, clearing his throat, "I owe you an apology, and I know you said you don't want to hear it, but I really want to say it." Draco rolled his eyes. "Brilliant!" he muttered. "So it's like that! I need to indulge you so that you can feel better." Weasley frowned, and Draco was almost surprised to see that he looked troubled at Draco's comment.
"No,"
he returned, shaking his head. "That's not what I want. I want to fix this." "Why?" Draco challenged. "What is there to fix, Weasley? It's not like we've ever been friends. Why bother?" There was a moment of silence in which Weasley seemed to be choosing his words very carefully. It was strange seeing the other boy actually consider his answer like that. He tended to just blurt out whatever came to his mind.
or so it always appeared to Draco. Contrary to what you seem to be thinking, I don't actually hate you, Malfoy, he finally responded. I care about what you think of me. When Draco only snorted, he added, I'm not joking, it's the truth.
Excuse me if I find that a little hard to believe, Draco snapped, when you were always the first one to disregard me and my opinions.
Weasley frowned, then he replied, well, you never listened to me either. It was frustrating, okay?
Why should I have listened to you when you so clearly wanted to boot me out from day one?
Draco demanded, raising his voice now.
I could see it from the way you looked at me the moment I stepped into your compartment. A Malfoy, ew! And like that, you'd made up your mind.
Weasley opened his mouth as if to argue, and then he closed it again hesitantly. Finally, he nodded just once. Okay, he agreed. That's fair. I had a bit of a problem believing that your intentions were as pure as you painted them to be at first. But can't you blame me? That always came home ranting about your father, and we both know he was right to do so, so I was hard to know that you were any different.
You could have given me a chance, Draco snapped. Harry did!
Weasley sighed. He looked tired, all of a sudden. I could have, he agreed. But I was 11, and I didn't know any better.
Don't put it down to being 11 and prejudiced.
Draco rolled his eyes.
You're no better at 17!
Weasley gulped, seeming to pick that statement apart in his mind. Maybe not, he shrugged. But I want to be. I did a lot of thinking over the time I stayed at Bilzen. I want to be better, Malfoy. I was a git to Harry, and to Hermione, but especially to you, for a long time. And I want to change. Maybe you can give me a chance to do that?
Honestly, Draco raised his eyebrows, I'm so tired of having to give you chances. You screw up, and Harry and Hermione will forgive you, and I'll have to end up playing nice with you again, or else I'll be the big bad Slytherin. I'm tired of this. I don't want to give you chances you don't deserve anymore.
At that, Weasley laughed a little ruefully. Okay, I have questions. He's like, 1, when has Harry ever seen you as the big bad Slytherin? You can't do wrong in his eyes, and you know it. It's been the one thing that used to tick me off most about you, how you seem to be untouchable to him. It took me until you two were together to understand that it was because he was in love with you. But even then I resented you a little for it, to be honest. Draco opened his mouth to cut in, but Weasley kept talking. 2, when did you ever give me a proper chance or forgive me when I acted like a git? You'd always hold the grudges even after Harry and Hermione had forgiven me, and you would always let me feel how inadequate I was. It drove me bloody insane, okay? So you can't deal with someone actually confronting you with your bullcrap? Draco smiled. Maybe. Weasley allowed. Or maybe I'm human and I make mistakes and I wish that just once you wouldn't keep top of every misstep I've made in the past 7 years. So it's my fault that we don't get along, Draco demanded. That's what you're saying? No! Weasley groaned, looking frustrated again. I just want you to understand why I've been such a git, okay? Yes, I was out of line, but it wasn't always easy for me when you were around. Harry absolutely worshipped you and would have killed everyone who harmed you. Hermione loved you and spent all his time talking and studying with you. You were smart, funny, good at Quidditch, rich. Excuse me! Draco interrupted him, blinking, feeling quite out of his depths. Are you trying to tell me that you were actually jealous? Of course I was jealous, Weasley called. I mean, look at you. You just kept showing me all the ways it wasn't good enough. Draco gave to them, unsure how he had slipped into this bizarre conversation. Weasley, he said in a voice that clearly indicated that he thought he was talking to an insane person. You were down in that lake in 4th year as Harry's most important person. Hermione has been madly in love with you for years. Let's not kid ourselves. We all know you've been both dancing around it since at least 6th year, and if you hadn't pulled that stupid stunt with Lavender Brown, it would have long since happened. You have a family that isn't actually famous for their recent criminal history, and they have basically adopted both of them. How can you be jealous of me? Weasley had flushed a deep scarlet and was looking at Draco strangely now. Everyone seemed to always love you better, Weasley muttered a little helplessly. Even my sister, or Fred and George. Merlin, you're paranoid! Draco pointed out. If anything, it was me who was always on the outside. The lone Slytherin the summer stuck at the manor. You might have felt that way, Weasley shook his head, but you were always there, even when you weren't. He frowned, then he murmured, I'm beginning to think we might have disliked each other for exactly the same reasons, and is it not disturbing?
I disliked you because you were an insensitive git, Draco clarified. Not because I might or might not have felt on the outside to your merry group of Gryffindors.
Weasley took a deep breath and nodded, accepting Draco's words as they were. Oh no, he said. I'm sorry. I'll work on that. No more outbreaks of the git. I'll be good.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Draco snorted. Okay,
Weasley returned, almost cheeky now, and he quirked a tentative smile.
I'll hold you to that.
And one had to give it to him. Weasley tried.
It was a complete change from the boy that had left them in autumn. He was now optimistic to a fault, trying his best to motivate them and be helpful wherever he could. Gone were the days of lazing around and barking out moody commands. Now he did most tasks himself without complaints and cheered them on for everything they had to discuss as a team. The mysterious appearance of Gryffindor soared while Draco had been out cold, accompanied by a dull Patronus, gave their minds new munition for speculation. Obviously, someone had aided them in their quest for the sword. But who? Snape's Patronus is a doe, Draco told them quietly one afternoon as they discussed it, causing everyone to look at him with wide eyes. I saw him cast it once. It had been in 5th year when he had been stuck in Snape's office and Snape had tried to contact Dumbledore and half the Order all night.
That's right, Hermione whispered, blinking. We saw Kingsley talk to it the night Not led the Death Eaters into the castle.
But it can't be Snape, Harry protested, shaking his head. Snape killed Dumbledore. He's a Death Eater. But maybe Dumbledore's not dead, Weasley said, excited to bring out his own theory again. Maybe...
He's dead, Ron,
Hermione cut him off impatiently. It might be a coincidence, Draco allowed, biting his lip. It might be someone else's dull Patronus.
But it's a big coincidence, Hermione frowned, especially considering that Snape was supposed to have the sword in the first place.
But his sword is a fake, remember? Weasley interjected.
The one he handed to the goblins at Gringotts is... Hermione corrected him. He could have kept the real one to give it to us when the time was right.
But it makes no sense, Harry called. He's working for Don't you say that thing! Weasley got in, eyes wide. Don't you know about the ban? What ban? Harry asked, sounding irritated. They pulled a tracking spell on the night, Weasley explained. Every time someone says you know whose real name, all protection spells are disabled and snatchers will get notified so they can operate to that location immediately. They nearly got Kingsley like that. He's on the run now. He stared into their baffled faces. I thought you'd figured it out, he said, his voice quiet. Since you didn't get caught. We sort of slipped into the habit of not mentioning the name, thanks to you, Harry muttered, blinking. I guess that was lucky. I'll say so, Weasley nodded. Keep at it, we don't want to have a run-in with the snatchers, alright? They might be stupid, but still. Maybe, Draco figured Weasley was half useful to have around after all. Not that he'd ever be caught saying it out loud.